householders for leaving bins on the pavement. Have we done that yet, or when are we going to do that?
Thank you, Chair. At this stage, no, we haven't done that. What would be necessary is that each of the households being complained about would need to be served a notice, which required them to place their bin at a certain place at a certain time. And then if they failed, then there's a further process behind that where we would have to send further letters and warnings, and ultimately we could then issue a fixed penalty notice should they not comply. It's the view of officers that at this stage the problem is not so severe that it's necessary to actually serve notices on all persons in there.
The second one is regarding the shopping trolleys, which were left scattered over the borough. There's a full report there from Mr. Gill, which I appreciate. However, there's a company called Trolleywise, which you can get on an app. Officers and members can actually identify the bin, take a photograph of it, and this company will collect and return to the rightful owner. That could be quite useful and save officers a lot of time.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't aware of that company, but we'll certainly make inquiries and see whether or not it's of any use for us.
Thank you. And I've not got a supplementary for the third one, you'll be pleased to hear. Okay, item number petitions and deputations, have we any? No, did Mr. Boyce wish to speak on something? As he's got the right to speak on, question on notice, but Mr. Gill will direct me on that one.
Yeah, I have no objection to the councillor Boyce speaking.
Thank you, Chair. Putting it simply, the law should be applied fairly and equitably across all areas of the borough. If you start enforcing on bins on pavements, you're in significant trouble in parts of South Wixton, where basically the edge of curtilage is the pavement for quite a number of houses, i.e. terraced houses. So I would leave it to Mr. Gill's discretion to ensure that we have fair and equitable application.
That's fair dues. But we do get, as members, get complaints about bins on pavement, so it's just a matter of flagging it up so that we can actually do something about it if it causes a nuisance. Thank you. No petitions or deputations. Item number 8, sports facilities on page 9 to 15. This is item we've got Andrew Dingley, who's joined us for the first time, so please be kind to him. Thank you.
Good evening, members. As members are aware, this report is about sports facilities update. You will see from the report that there is a balance remaining, and the report sets out options for spending these funds. However, since the report was written, the Alliance League, which is referenced in paragraph 3.32 about the pitch improvement program, have withdrawn from the engagement in the project. Other than that, the spend is as set out in the report.
Thank you. Mr. Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. And concerns. This Section 106 agreement was for the development back of the council offices. Yeah? I was under the impression that a great deal of that money was used for the new pavilion on Horsewell Lane to fund the sports part of that development. And I'm quite surprised that it's here practically in Falk. Also, I believe Mr. Falk could probably answer what is the current situation with the FA on redeveloping the football pitches across the borough, because we've been talking about that quite a long time now and it seems to be dragging on. And I was under the impression that the council were going to do that, but now it appears it's going to be the Oadby House. at the forefront of that. So I'm just a little bit concerned that things keep changing. And this is the first I've heard of this. I was told the other night that it was possibly that the funding for the Horsewell Lane development actually came from the Tesco Section 106 monies. So I'm just a bit confused as to why I was originally told that the money from this development was going to be used to fund the new pavilion, the sports side of it. And now that's not the case. And are we absolutely certain that this money is going to be spent in time? Because I don't want to give it back, and we can't give it back. It's money to be used for upgrading the sports facilities across the whole of the borough, and it should be spent. And I'm surprised it's not been spent.
Mr. Gill?
Thank you, Chair. This section 106 monies is actually from Station Road, the former Leicestershire College site. The issue that you raised about Horsewell Lane was flagged up with me earlier, and we have done some inquiries, and I'm assured by finance that the money is there and it's available. In terms of the spend, officers recognise that there have been some difficulty in spending it. The problem is that not everybody wants to have our money to upgrade their sports facilities. We are looking at the 106 working group to make sure that it's more robust and more active. And with the same sentiment of you, we wouldn't want to see this money going back, and hence the reason why this report has been brought forward. As you appreciate, 2013 was before my time, so it's I'm coming in on the back end of this. But the officers are telling me that they have tried to engage, and an example is the Alliance League withdrawn from the initial consultations and discussions about utilising some of that money. Bottom line is, unfortunately, we can't afford or we can't force them to take the money, but perhaps we ought to look a little more at the wording that we utilise when we enter into Section 106 agreements, so that the spend can be broader rather than very tight specific. So if it was for physical activity as opposed to sport, there's a distinction, there's a difference. And by doing that going forward, we're hoping to make sure that we are not in this position in future years.
Mr. Bentley, you should come back.
Yeah, just one comment. You say, Mr. Gill, that other organisations are not taking up this money, offers of this money. But I believe the Borough Council would be the majority stakeholder within the borough of sports facilities on its own parks, its own football pitches, its own tennis courts, its own leisure facilities. So why can't we as a borough council use that money in conjunction with the FA, as we've talked about for quite a few years now, and spend it to upgrade our sports facilities that we have control over?
The position on that is that Section 106 funding tends to be in respect of capital projects. And then if we were to spend money on capital projects, we then have to finance the revenue budget to maintain them. So it becomes a twofold problem. That's why we engage with sports clubs and other clubs, so that we can provide a capital input for them, and they undertake to manage them on an ongoing basis. It is a very difficult area. We're very conscious of it, as I've said, and we are working to try and come up with a strategy as to how we can utilise this money. We obviously want the money. We obviously are aware there is a need for an upgrade of sports facilities across the borough, but it has to be a joint project, because the bottom line is we don't have the revenue to maintain them going forward, and there's little point in spending a lot of capital making something look good and then allowing it not to be maintained properly.
I ask then, Chair, that members of this committee be kept updated on the progress over the next weeks and months outside of this committee, not just waiting for the next committee meeting.
They will be. I'm going to make
I believe members need involvement in this.
I'm going to make a recommendation when we finish debating. Mrs. Hack.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not done. Like Councillor Bentley, I've got concerns about this as well, because it's the money from 2013. Is there a particular reason why it hasn't been spent so far? And what guarantees have we got that it's going to be spent in before it's actually before the deadline? And is there any chance that that deadline can be extended or not? Is that not possible?
I can deal with the second part of that, and I'm sure Mr. Dingley will deal with the other matters before I stop it spent. The reality is that if we don't spend this money, then we can go back to the developer and ask the developer for an extension. But they would likely only agree to that if there was a solid plan in place for the monies to be spent.
Okay. Mr. Morris. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the 3G football facility, the one that's been discussed for Saturday, and it's not that I'm against this, it's just that what residents have been communicated with regarding this, because have we spoke to them and said, oh, by the way, you're going to lose part of the open space on Bladen Road Park to South Leicestershire College. What have we done with that, and what are we giving up to the college what they want? Because we all know the college have been after this for many, many years. They had the place right over the other side on the Wixton-Knighton border, which is overgrown and it's a complete mess now. And this looks to me like we are giving up some of the open space of Blaby Road Park to the college to satisfy their sports requirement. And I know it does say that they may open up their gym and their cafe, but unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember where they were going to open that up when they got permission to build there in the first place. So I've seen what they were going to do then, and we're still a number of years down. And at the moment, I think that we're giving up something, and the residents may not be happy. They're getting what they want, and we're losing some of the open space for the residents of the park. Like I say, I'm not against it. My son plays on 3G pitches. I know all about them. I know the cost of them and stuff like that. But years ago, we've looked at a cafe. We've looked at redeveloping the site where the bowlers are. I've had work done on that. I've seen it all. It's been shot down at every stage. But all of a sudden now, the college are going to get this, and we get a cafe. Yet for 10 years, I've been shot down on a cafe on Blaby Road Park. The toilet facilities, I've been shot down and redeveloping them because Tesco's is just across the road. And yet now we're really stuck with this, Chair. And I would like to have been involved in it, shall we say, from the outset as the local councillor. And certainly the young person, I do run the youth committee and, Children and Young People's Forum. Again, I would imagine that I could have been involved in that sense, and I haven't been. And I'd like to get some information on it, because it seems that we're giving a lot, and what are we actually getting back from it? Because I'll be honest, I don't see them opening the cafe and everything else, because I've been down that road. I've had tours of the college. I've been shown the gym on the second floor. I've never had access to it like the rest of the residents of South Wixton and the borough. So I'm really disappointed that this is here, and I would like to have been involved in it, and I would like to know far more about it, Chair. Perhaps not now, but perhaps out of the meeting, and as a local councillor, as my fellow ward councillor, probably would have liked to have been told about it as well and been involved. As per the gentleman on the screen would have perhaps liked to have been involved in it. So I'd like to know more about this before it goes any further, Chair. I'd like to be involved in the conversations. I'd like to know where the residents have been communicated with. I'd like to know where the young people of the borough have been communicated with this, and numerous other things. But obviously we're in the meeting now, and I don't want to go through just this. So outside the meeting, I'm happy to have a meeting with the officers involved and share my concerns and thoughts. Like I say, I'm not against 3G football pitches. They are great to play on throughout the winter months. And my son certainly goes on the ones outside the borough, I will add, before anyone thinks I'm going interested. It's outside the borough. So I'd like to be involved if that's possible, please, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. I'm being very good this evening. I'm muting, so it takes me a fraction longer. I absolutely echo what Councillor Morris has said, and indeed what the previous two speakers said. I didn't read the report until Monday night, and didn't know its contents until that point. including the fact that somebody had to point out to me that it's actually delegated to me and the senior leadership team to resolve it. Putting it simply, I have a question, and then I will lead into what I suspect Councillor Bolt is about to say. The question is, I understood that a significant proportion of money from the Section 106, from the redevelopment of the Station Road School, South Leicester College at that point campus, was actually spent on Horsewell Lane Pavilion. Now, I may be wrong, and there may be two lots of Section 106 money, but I'd like it confirmed that that money actually still exists and is sitting in a bank account.
Yes. Comby?
Right. Councillor Boyce, at this point in time, we've done some investigations on the Section 106, and at present there's I think a figure of about 600 and something thousand pounds of Section 106 money. We still need to do some further investigation, make sure everything ties back. One of the things that have been mentioned by Dave Gill is the fact that we want to double check, make sure we're absolutely clear how much money we've got and make sure things are allocated to the correct place. So, in answer to your question,
Okay, thank you. It was obviously me who raised this morning with Mr. Gill the fact that it suddenly struck me that I've been involved in putting the funding, at least understanding the funding for Horsewell Lane, and actually the two are connected somewhat significantly. So we need to ensure that the Section 106 money actually exists. That's the first thing. The second thing is, clearly, as no member has had sight of this report before the last few days, we need very urgently to allow members an input into other things that may or may not be taken into account and may or may not be done. And then thirdly, in its very simple sense, much as I like having things delegated to me with the officers, in this instance, I'm not sure that that's completely fair or reasonable, and I would support whatever motion the chair is about to make regarding that matter.
Thank you. Mr. Lloyd wishes to speak.
Yes, it's working now. Just very quickly, it's only Miner's situation here, but my recommendation B talks about members provide officers with direction, how the matters proceed. I think which may become available from this total. Is that right? Because there's some things that can't be done and not being done. If I may, and then I'll come back.
Well, what I suggest is that members have seen the report now. If they've got any ideas what they want to spend money and put those into officers and the other alternative plans, that can be discussed. And then I'm going to ask that delegated, I don't like giving delegated powers, but delegated powers be given to the leader, myself, our vice chair, to actually make the determination to get the money spent in the appropriate time. Consultation from all members with their views, and we'll have to work around that and actually get it actioned. Because if I wait till the next meeting, we shall miss the boat. So that's the only way I can suggest that actually we haven't given delegated powers. But all members need to have their input. Any ideas they've got, let us have them, and then we'll do something about it. I didn't see this report till Monday, didn't know it was coming. So, like all members, I'm a bit stuck at the moment, but if that's acceptable to members, that's the only way forward I can see that we can get done on time.
If that helps, Chairman. I just need some clarification then on what we're going to be voting for on this paper, A and B. If I could turn to page recommend providing etc. That is a recommendation which doesn't show in this first bit. So need some clarification as to what we're voting for.
Okay. Any comments? Mrs. Hack?
Extra 24.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, can the ward members be involved wherever the work is being carried out?
Yes.
Thank you.
So as to recommendation, the consensus report be noted. Well, we are noting that. Members provide officers with direction as how this matter proceeds. Way forward is to members to put forward their views to officers, which are officers it's going to be because we're a bit short on the ground with officers, but say Mr. Gill, because he's in charge of legal things. So Mr. Gill gets a short straw. Put him to Mr. Gill, put him in the melting pot, and then we'll make the decision along with the ward members what we can and can't do to get the money spent on time.
So, Chair, sorry. Yes, it was me. Sorry, Chair. If I can we put a time on it? Can we say by the end of the month suggestions in? That will give us October to make a decision in November and December to deliver. If we don't actually put a time on it, we will let it drift.
That's entirely reasonable. Okay, so it's up to members now to put their ideas forward in the next three weeks, 3.5 weeks, and then we'll kick it around and come up with a conclusion. Mr. Gill, are you happy with that?
Yes, I'm aware that you moved the motion.
I'm going to move it. I want a seconder.
Yeah, you need a second.
Well,
I'll second that.
So I'm happy with that and with the date. So it's over to you.
so can we vote on that? It's delegated powers. I don't like delegated powers, but I've got no choice in this instance. Right. We shall move on now to item number 9. Mr. Thorpe, light bulb.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides delegation and collaboration in relation to the light bulb programme, which currently runs until the 31st of March 2022, is extended by 2 years to the 31st of March 2024. This will bring the term of the agreement of each of the other partners in line with that of Charmable Account Agreement, which is already for a period of 5 years up until the 31st of March 2024. It will also allow for a firm business case to be prepared following on from the pandemic and to take into account a number of new light bulb services, the hoarding project and the dementia care programme. A 2-year extension will give these services time to bed in before they are built into the business case and the subsequent agreement. My understanding is that the other councils within the partnership are also in general support of this proposal. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
To ask Mr. Thorpe, the other councils involved in the partnership, have they made their decision already? Or are we the first?
Not aware of the order of decisions being made, Chair, but as I say, I understand that there is general agreement amongst the partnership to extend for the 2-year term.
Mr. Lloydell?
Thank you, Chair. The opportunity to do a business case. I notice on the reported implications of financial implications, there are no financial implications arising from this proposed extension. And there's no costs here whatsoever. Does the business plan start to put that together and know how much we're spending?
Yes, the business plan will set out the costs for the subsequent part of the light bulb programme. So it will set out a future agreement and it'll set out the costs within that business plan.
Other questions at all? Okay, so are we going to extend the programme for another 2 years? I propose, I've got a seconder.
Second.
Mrs Adams, okay, all in favour, can we indicate? Yep. That's that one. Number 10. As mentioned before, Mrs Phillister is not here this evening, so this will be doubling around other officers a little bit. We have with us this evening Mr Chris Eyre, who's housing manager, and he's going to be thrown into the lion's den to answer a few questions, no doubt, and give a short presentation on how he's been liaising with residents over the last few months. So to start with, corporate performance. Any questions on corporate performance? 20. Mrs Morris.
I'm not sure. This is page 26. Can I talk about that one?
No, not there yet.
Right.
I'm going through each section at a time to give officers
I thought that was part of it. No.
give officers a chance. Right.
There's not one, Bill.
Yes. Yes. Mr Broadley on his mathematics.
Yeah. Page 20, 2.4, after the 96 indicated 84 reporting, but if you calculate them up, it's 63 green, 17 amber and 5 red, which is 85. Chart one table, they've rectified it and they've put down 4, so it does work out to the correct amount.
Mr Gill.
Can I suggest that as this was Mrs Fisher's report which she prepared, that at the time that she prepared the report, she was obviously in the early stages of feeling unwell and had some difficulty in counting. But it is noted.
Thank you. Right. Right, now, Mr Eyre, this is you now. This is your first foray into the committee. So, built environment update, housing capital programme. Over to you.
The housing capital programme, we're on target to complete full expenditure by the end of the financial year. The housing investment programme's going well. We've just come into the end of our summer programme and we're about to implement our autumn winter programme. The autumn and winter programmes are scaled down somewhat from the summer programme, purely because of the sort of shortness in days and the inconvenience and the cold weather. Cold weather causes residents when they're having modernisations done to their properties. We've also got a number of adaptations to do in council-owned properties. We've financed that project and we're hopeful to complete all outstanding adaptation requests to council properties by the end of autumn. And then we should be up to date to carry out the requests as they roll through to us.
Thank you. We're going through each section at a time. So, housing options and homelessness. Point 2. Page 22. Yes, 2. Sorry.
Yep. So housing options and homelessness. We've been quite proactive in our response to homeless preventions. The number of households that are presenting as homeless remains steady at around 25 households per month. We've had a bit of a problem in moving people moving people on from temporary accommodation, mainly due to the pandemic and the problems that's caused us. But we are hopeful that going forward, with the number of properties we've got coming through, and the closer working partnership ties we've got with our housing partners, housing associations, we are starting to get a lot more properties available to let for people who are potentially homeless.
Okay, and the next one is gas safety, which is 100% compliant now.
Yep, gas safety, we were non-compliant round about January time, again, mainly due to the pandemic. We put in place an action plan to deal with the non-compliant properties, and I think around about the end of July, we were 100% compliant, and we remain 100% compliant going forward.
Okay, thank you. Now we've got some questions on these, so we'll start now. Mr. Lloydall.
Sorry, I'm down on 3.6. We've not got there yet.
No, not got there yet. No. Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question regarding housing. You mentioned that we are still in partnership with other organisations. Do we still have options, and do we still place people in Cobb's Way on the Little Hill estate?
Familiar with that scheme? Is that is the scheme
Housing Association?
Not familiar with that scheme, but the arrangements we have with housing associations is that they will advertise a proportion of their voids onto our website, and that gives people opportunity to bid for them. I can check with that particular scheme.
I was under the impression that the council had the option of housing people on that particular development from when it was first built. And I'd also like to know that what would the council's powers be in assisting with possibly serious, I don't know how to put this nicely, serious antisocial behaviour, I'll just say it. And what powers would the council have on other people's tenants? What I'm really going to say is, are they actually our tenants in a housing association house, or are they the housing association's problem?
Well, I think Mr. Gill ought to answer that one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, the position is with regard to nominations, it would be unusual where a housing association had property that we would have a perpetual right of nomination, normally time limited. In terms of ASB, whilst primarily it's a matter for the housing association, we have in fact taken action in that area. We did closure order not so very long ago where there was social behaviour. My position as head of law is quite simple. If housing associations wish to engage with us because they have an issue, then I'm happy to exercise the powers that we have as a local authority, which they don't. So they don't have the power to issue closure orders. That has to be done by the local authority. But I'm more than happy to work with them, but I'm less happy doing their work for them, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mrs. Hack.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, it mentions that we've got 25 households in homeless. Do we house them in our own stock, or do we use external facilities?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we have a number of properties that we use for temporary accommodation purposes. Most of those are houses or properties that we've procured through the private sector. So we lease them off private landlords and we use them as our temporary units of accommodation. There's one or two that we've taken out of the general housing register stock for the purpose of temporary accommodating people. But in the main, it's the private stock that we lease, that we place people in.
Okay. So
any question? Come back.
So, Chair, are we able to house them, all those 25 households, into the properties that we've leased from the private sector, or do we still use temporary accommodation?
So your temporary accommodation. fortunately.
Thanks.
Light bulb. Who wants to do the light bulb bit? I think Mr. Thorpe doing that bit. A break for a minute.
In terms of light bulb, the dashboards are included in Appendix 2 to the report. But I have tried to pull out some specific information, particularly following the comments that you made when light bulb colleagues attended the last meeting. So the things that I've pulled out, which hopefully are helpful to you, is that in Q1, 10 DFGs were completed. The average completion time was 9 weeks, below the 20-week target set across the light bulb partnership, but also was the second best performance in the county. And in Q1, £182,000 was spent or committed, and I do apologise for the typo in the report in relation to that. Any questions on light bulb before I any beyond that?
Any questions at all? I think the proof will be the pudding at the end of the financial year when COVID is finished and things get back to normal, see how we get progressing then. All right. Right, now we go back to Mr. Eyre now, void calculation.
Thank you, Chair. As you can see, this one is showing up as amber and that we are not close to our target time of 25 days average void. This is usually the case when I'll go back a bit. Previously, the void calculation was reported, but that time void was calculated as the time that a property was with our major works team. So you didn't really get a true picture of how long a property was void. So, for example, wouldn't know from tenancy end date to the new tenancy start date. So we didn't give you that full calculation. So we've done some alterations to our working practices to include the void period as everything involved in that management of a void property. So basically, when a tenant moves out and hands the keys in, we will calculate the time running from that date to the date we give it the keys to the new tenant. That has brought about problems, which is that means our void time at the moment is a bit higher than previously reported, but that's due to the change in definition of how we calculate voids. I probably not explained that very well, so I'm happy to take any questions if anyone's got that one.
Right, here we go. Mr. Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for that. I did understand that. I'm quite surprised that it wasn't actually done like that before. So I was always under the impression that it was, but it's nice to have it clarified now that it's tenancy end, tenancy start. Just as a matter of interest, what would you say is the average condition of when they are detenanted? Is there normally a great deal of work, no work, or is there any common themes throughout the voids that can take time and extend it before somebody else can?
I'm afraid to say it's a combination of everything. Today we've got one property back which is in pristine condition, albeit needs modernising. But on the flip side of that, we can get properties back that are, for want of a better word, trashed. So it is a mixture of everything. If I was to nail my colours to the mast, I would say, in general, they do come back relatively okay, albeit perhaps need modernising, but generally in good condition.
Mr. Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. I hate to be pedantic, but there we go. I don't want to set us up to fail on a target, because basically, if there are any properties which are going to take in excess, shall we say, of 3 months to bring back in, they need to be discounted. Otherwise, you're obviously going to fail, because that will continue to rack up, even if it takes 4, 5, 6 months. The other issue is business statistics. I can't remember if it's the mode or the medium, whatever. It's most houses will be done within a short period of time, shall we say 15 to 20 days, but your average may be 43 days because there's some will knock it back. So the most important thing I think for it also to report is not what the average is, but what most houses are turned around within. I think that would also help us, because in the end, if most houses are turned around within 20 days, that's actually good. It then means that we then can concentrate in understanding those that are outside that range. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, we've got one property that's been empty some time, but that's waiting for a through the floor lift, which has been ordered, but we can't install it till it's actually delivered. So that's extended that one quite a time. And we had one flat which we repossessed a week or so ago, which I understand was not much left inside it when the tenant left. It was whole. So, we've got different combinations. But as Mr. Ayres says, a lot of the tenants are elderly and leave the property in reasonable condition and just want modernisation. So,
Thank you, Chair. I understand that there's repair works that can delay the void time, but 43 days is quite a lot. But there are other areas mentioned, such as advertising the property and lettings. So that needs to be improved to bring it down, and achieving our target in number of days, that void number of days with the property will actually have an impact on the homelessness as well. So I think that needs to be looked at properly so that we can achieve our target.
Okay. Mr. Ray, want to make any comment on that?
Just to say, yeah, I totally agree with you. 43 days is not a good average to be at. We are working to get that down so at year end, it reaches an acceptable figure of 25 days. There's a lot of background work going off in changing processes. So although there are things we have to do to enable us to achieve that, and that will include some of the arrangements we've got with our contractors to carry out major works within specific time scales.
Okay, Mr. Adam.
Okay, so according to the definition that you've already given, which is you give take the keys back from the tenant, and the new tenants, you give them the keys, and that's the void period.
Yeah.
So in this, what you're saying is that previously you did not include the time period of advertising, shortlisting, allocation of property, and the income that was lost during that period. That was not calculated in the previous void period. Is that what you're saying?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Okay, so then by including all that, what you're saying is that you're going to shorten the time period, or are you going to actually increase it?
The start of this process, by adopting this definition, I accepted. I knew we would be high because of the fact that we needed to check. If I'm being realistic, 25 days at year end is probably a stretch, but it's not. That 25 days is pretty much an industry standard average that housing associations and local authorities work to. So that was a starting point, one, to get the team motivated to get void times down and to kind of sharpen their practices up in dealing with empty properties. But we had to start somewhere. I'm happy to, sort of defend our position as long as we're seen to be going in the right way. Now, obviously, if it comes to the next period and I'm reporting a significant move negatively away from this timescale, then I'm not doing my job right. So I'll open myself up for further scrutiny then.
Also, as long as it's empty, the less money we're taking in, and we need the money, don't we?
Yeah.
So, business case for that. Any other questions on this section before we move to cleaning? No, move to cleaning then.
Cleaning, we have just, sorry, apologies.
Carry on, Chris Ellis. Cleaning first, don't worry.
We've just recruited a team leader to the cleaning for the cleaning team. She started about a month ago. At the moment, she's going around all the schemes and doing a sort of a review and an analysis of what condition our communal areas and properties are in, and what sort of services we need to look at putting into specific areas to raise the standards. She's also doing a lot of work with the cleaning team, getting them on board and engaged with what we're doing. And I'm hopeful that in the next few months we can start having standards which residents and tenants can point to and hold to account as to whether or not we're meeting those standards.
Okay, Mr. Lloyd Law.
Thank you. So it's the first time we've met this day, so welcome to this committee. It's nice to put a face to name. Thank you. And a matter of record, already team leader for cleaning. And now in the second paragraph, we're looking to provide 2 additional caretakers. We just identify where the costs of those are coming from, how they sustainable.
The caretakers are recycled posts. So within the housing team, we did have 2 positions for, repairs operatives. We've taken those 2 vacant posts and sort of redesigned their job description to be more of a caretaking role and to support the cleaning team. So in my experience, that is a better use of those positions. So I don't envisage there being a significant cost increase in having contractors do the work that those original posts were contracted to do. So that's within existing resources. The cleaning team leader, that was calculated during a restructure of the housing team. So we worked that into the accounts, into the budgets for this coming year and so forth. It is a sustainable post, all posts as well.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you wish to come in?
Regarding the posts, because before we had the cleaning team leader, we had an agency member doing that. So obviously having a permanent member of staff, saving the costs and staying. All of these are coming in within the assistant staff and budgets.
Mr. Allen?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question with regards to standards and the consultation that you'll be doing, meetings. First and foremost, I welcome the fact that you're going to be talking to stakeholders, but what standards will you be working at? Is there a benchmark that you'll be working towards? And in terms of the consultation, the meetings, how will they be taking place? Will it be a questionnaire of some sort, or will it just be just asking individually? Is there going to be some sort of a framework around that?
Chair, that leads me nicely onto the resident engagement question. First of all, the standards, we are looking at what other facilities teams within the area, the county area, what they provide and what they offer to residents. So that will give us a basis to work from. And then obviously what we want to do is take on board what the residents sort of feelings are and other stakeholders. So a lot of our specifications may be a sort of a box standard approach, but then they may be enhanced depending on which area we're working with and depending what residents have fed back to us in those consultation meetings. If I can go on to the resident engagement bit, because this kind of answers the next part of that question. So, as members will know, engaging with residents takes many forms. And what we have done in the last 2 or 3 months, we've opened up a tenant questionnaire, satisfaction questionnaire. So we've been sending out paper copies of questionnaires. We've been ringing tenants up and gauging what their views are, not just with cleaning, but with other areas of the service. And we've also had an online survey going, I think it's close to 3 months that the online survey was there. And that gave people the opportunity to comment on all aspects of housing. Unfortunately, the response back, although the responses that we got were useful, but in terms of numbers, it was pretty limited. It wasn't a good response to give us a clear understanding of or a clear acceptance. This was the overall position or feeling of our tenants. So we've started a resident tenant engagement program, and some of you may be aware that in June we did a community clean day on Junction Road. That's where members of the housing team got together with the local beat bobbies. Councillor Bolter attended, and we had a sort of a couple of skips, some contractors on site, couple of skips. And we made a bit of a day of it, cleaning up that Bolter Crescent area. We took the opportunity there to engage with tenants and start talking to them about things that affect them and what was going off in their area and what improvements they'd like to see. So that proved a good way of engaging with tenants. It's a tried and tested formula by myself. I've done this many times in previous roles. And we've got another community cleaning day last Thursday in September at Bolter Crescent. It's my intention to get an engagement programme out to members so they can see what we're planning over the next year. Other events could be pop-up coffee mornings. Also, in previous role, turned up with a catering van and held a pop-up morning on an estate, and people come along, get free breakfast roll and a drink. And with housing officers there, we have that discussion with tenants about what it is that them or what improvements they'd like to see on site. So there's lots of different ways we are looking at engaging with tenants. It's a full team approach. So housing officers from every part of the service will be in attendance. So someone from lettings will be there, someone from homeless and so on. And we also extend that invitation to other people within the council. So how we may extend that to housing benefits, so we can get a housing benefits person down there, just on the off chance that the questions get asked of us of those specific service areas. We're also looking at doing some things with our elderly residents in the schemes. So one thing I've got in mind is to have a pantomime show put on place at one of the schemes, but it's all very much in the pilot stage at the moment. Hopefully, when I recruit to the position of strategy and performance officer, they can take a lot of that strategic side off of me, which I'm also doing. And then that will enable me to get together a full range of events and what we're doing and where we're doing it. We'll obviously inform members a bit closer to the time, so the opportunity is there for members to attend the events as well. To take any questions on that?
Yeah. We also do regular estate inspections before COVID hit. If Mr. Eyre could inform members when they're taking place, members are always welcome to come along and visit the properties outside, but not very often do I see another member there apart from myself. So it would be nice to have another member there with me. Mr. Bentley?
Some of those members work full time. I will like to say that I have just took semi-retirement, so I only work 3.5 days a week now. So
good.
Inspections on Monday.
Good.
Happy to attend.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Eyre at all before you can have a rest? No? Okay. Right, exception reporting built environment. Now, this is going to be a split job here. Now, discussed earlier today with Mr. Gill, he was going to check the report, but now I see we've got Mr. Thorpe here, Comby here. So, who's going to check the whip regarding the collection rates and the revenues? Yes, a volunteer.
Zero, finance updates?
Yes.
Right, okay. So with the revenues, the report goes into what the revenues and benefits team does. But I'm just going to highlight the key points. So the key points is we obviously have to collect the council tax and the business rates. And the rate of collection at the moment from April to June is low. That was due to the COVID situation and also the situation that with regards to business rates, some of the accounts needed updating, and also and our team, business collections, engaged with businesses to start collecting money in, because some of them have been reluctant to pay. Because in counter that, we've actually been issuing loads of business grants out in different formats, COVID ones. But the action we're actually taking at the moment, it's not in this report, is we've just recruited a permanent revenue and benefits manager. We're looking at the collection rates, the collection team. We've also been updating the business rates accounts so that we can contacting businesses to start the process of actually getting these collection rates up, and we're reallocating staff to start to do that, because the council tax collection rates, although they need improving, and we are still working on those, business rates is still key. We need to bring in money as well. And I've sort of mentioned the COVID grants we've paid out. So, for instance, there's a grant called the ARG, additional, a grant which we've had 1.6 million grants. We paid out. This report was, I think the figure was 700 something thousand, but at the moment, the current amount is just under 1 million, which is good. And we're going to reopen it again to give businesses an opportunity to also receive them. And the report just highlights a couple of the other grants that have been paid out. We had a restart grant, which was a 1.8 million grant, and we've had about 1.3 million paid out. That grant's ended now. And so that's just a brief highlight. So you can see on the other page, which highlights what the collection targets are and what the actual collection rates are to the previous years, which highlights the point that we do need to improve in those areas. And there's also the section 4.5, exception reporting for finance. On that chart, it talks about gives them the KPIs. On the first one's about taken to process housing benefit claims. The target was 25, and we're over target. The collection rate is 21.61 days, so we're 6. We need to reduce that slightly, and then we go through the charts, which also talks about the council tax collection rates, as I mentioned before, and then we talk about the actual account statement of accounts. At this time, when this information is put in, the 1920 audit hadn't been completed. We still had 1 or 2 final things to complete. The 1920 audit of the statement of accounts has now been completed, and we've had an unqualified report. So although they were amber, they've now been achieved. Back to you, Chair, if there's any questions.
Okay, Mrs. Morris.
Chair, clarification before because I might not then need to ask the question. Are you saying that your targets are bad on business rates because there are grants that the other hand is paying out so that the businesses can either have a grant towards their business rate or have the money to pay their business rates? Could I have an answer?
Yes.
Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't.
Have an answer to that.
I wasn't as clear. So what's happened with businesses where they've qualified? There's all different types, whether they're retail or non-essential, depending on the type of business. They've qualified for different grants that the council's been paying out, and also, and those grants have helped the businesses run, and they can use that money for whatever they want to keep the businesses operating. And now we're at a point where the courts have reopened, and we need businesses to start paying. We need businesses to start paying us our business rates as we're chasing them. And some have, because of the COVID situation, have just thought we can have a holiday from paying our business rates. So what the council officers are doing is actively contacting businesses, chasing the money or making arrangement payments with them. So sorry about the confusion before.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Finance Department to be in the red for not meeting their targets if the reason for them not meeting their targets is because the businesses needed the grants to continue so that they could pay their business rates, because it's a bit sort of chicken and egg. And while I want to see the collection rates and all the rest of them improving, I don't want any council department to be penalised because a I still can't quite get my head around why they're not paying unless it's a choice not to pay them. Is it, what I'm trying to get to, are they not paying because they're not financially able? Or are they not paying because, like a lot of businesses currently, they're using COVID as a reason not to?
You've hit the nail on the head. Some businesses are using COVID as a reason not to, some businesses are using COVID as a reason not to pay, even though they have the ability to pay. And then you've got other businesses who are struggling to pay. So what the council are doing is making arrangements with them. Because if you think about it, in the COVID situation, I'll give you an example. Some takeaway businesses have made more money during COVID than before. And there's similar types of businesses like that, where I'm not saying it's takeaway businesses, but you have businesses that have the means to pay, but have just used COVID as an excuse not to pay. So that's where we as officers have got to chase them and, and use the weight of the courts to get the money that's due to the council.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Allen?
Thank you, Chair. Big concern about chasing businesses, meeting our targets, and businesses going under, and then ended up not paying anything at all. Okay, it's a real big concern. And I know that nationally, this is a situation that's unfolding. But what I did like, when I was listening to the exchange there, what I did like to hear is that you're making some sort of an arrangement with businesses in the sense that you're trying to get money in, but at the same time, you're trying to keep them afloat. And how much of that is going on? I'd like to know that, because I don't want to overstress businesses, the ones that are genuinely suffering, but also I don't want it being a situation where we're sending other businesses under or forcing them to, close down or go bankrupt or whatever, just to reopen in a different way.
So, to Chair, in answer to that question, I've had the same conversation with my team. I was saying that we've got to chase money, but we have to be reasonable. So if a business genuinely struggling, we've got to make a reasonable arrangement, whether if they should be paying us, say, £100 a month, for example, and they can't afford to, we'll make some sort of arrangements where they're paying £20 a month. So we are taking that into account. So, I've had this conversation with our recovery team about, being reasonable and looking at each individual business as an individual.
And if I may come back, Chair, I just want that to reflect in our targets a little bit better, and it'd be much clearer that that's what we're doing, instead of just giving us this overall target, but just show a little bit more clarity in which businesses we're doing that with, how we get money in, so that we're fairer in our targets and it reflects there to all the residents. That's what I just want to make clear.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Hack.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I too am concerned about the gap between our actual collection rate and the target rate. And you mentioned that we get to keep 40%. That's quite a lot. Is that going to have an impact on our budget next year? And also the money that we pay to the government, I know you said that it's in stages now, but do they allow the councils to keep any extra to bridge that gap between loss of income due to actual and target?
Right, okay. So we don't keep any extra money. It's just our payments are phased, the money we pay back to the government. So so we're not getting any extra. So we obviously have to, a good chunk of the council's budget is funded from business rates. So we have to collect money. So far, even though our collection rates are low, as far as cash flow is concerned, we're still fine. So we obviously collect money in with behalf of the government, and if that's sitting in our bank account, which it is at the moment, the way we're facing the payments still keeps our cash flow going. And so we're still in a situation where we can still collect money gradually from businesses, but still keep our cash flow going. But we can't do that long term. So the phased payments are over 3 years at the moment.
Any further questions? Mr. Lloydall?
It's quite important because of nations in newspapers. Can you just clarify for me? You said we're collecting the business rates and we're allowed to keep 40% of it. 70% and 30% collected locally. 70% are built up of grants and some business rates. That 70% is disappeared. You don't get that anymore, but it's been replaced by business rates. That's how I understand it. Collect the business rates, we're only allowed to keep 40% of it. Short from the original budget. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is important. The services that we provide now totally depend on us collecting those business rates.
Right. Okay. Sorry, I'll ask you a question.
I'm trying to be.
Yeah, it's right.
It's important because we might need to answer this later on elsewhere.
Right. So without going too technical, for this current year that's gone with COVID, 2020-21, the business rates, there was exemptions, businesses got exemptions for business rates. So the council, although we keep 40% of it, the government gave us grants to offset some of those losses. And they're called Section 31 grants we've got. So the government has constantly changed the scheme on business rates, or what you've just. The way the scheme is at the moment, we're not in any significant difference. There might be slight differences. There's differences. Net position.
Sorry, thank you very much for that. But that's only because of the COVID and we're getting these grants back. When that is over, those grants will no longer be available, will they?
That's true. When the COVID situation is, then the whole situation have to be reviewed.
So basically, then back to this 40% business rate, being able to keep that. I've been here before when this came about, because I then said, if you depended on the business rate top up the services that we've got. If the businesses are doing well, we'll get a collection rate, take the base figure. If the businesses are doing skip on the end of the street. That when they started to introduce it, and that was confirmed. That's exactly what will happen if business rates are not collected. Forget the grants, that's because of the COVID, that's understandable. Thank you very much to everybody. Under normal circumstances, that is how it would work in the future if we don't get the business rates. The speakers. Thank you. Sorry. All right, thank you. My apologies for it. Thank you for the answer. Thank you.
Okay. No other speakers? We'll move on to Mrs. Fisher's reports now. So I think Mr. Gill's taking this. Is it Mr. Gill? You've got the short straw?
Oh, indeed. Yeah.
Ain't really all out word.
Well, I'd say
highlight
is that just looking at it, obviously we have the virtual customer service centre that we're working on, and there's further work to be completed. Mrs. Fisher set out the call volumes, which show a comparison from last year and this year. We are still continuing the customer service improvement. We're on a 3-year cycle, and there is a robust action plan that is in place, which I'm aware of, my managers are also involved with. And then we have a section with regard to the complaints and the fact that we're using the new complaint system in triaging the complaints. So it sets out on page 28 the number of complaints that we've received and also the number that have progressed from the initial complaint, the numbers that we triaged in the first place by customer services. The second stage in the process is that the service manager to contact the complainant to try and resolve it informally, and you'll see that we end up with stage 2 complaints, of which, given the volumes of initial complaints, are very few. And then there's a section with regard to the customer service centre and its customer satisfaction surveys. As you've said, Chair, I don't propose to go through all of it. What I will do is take questions and try my best to answer them. And if not able to answer them tonight, then I'll go away and hopefully when Mrs. Fisher is better, I'll be able to provide an answer to members.
Mrs. Morris.
Mr. Gill, I don't expect you to be able to answer any of my questions. To me. My first question is on call volumes. I can see where they've increased, but my question is around why can we not see how many missed calls? Because most telephone systems also record the calls you've missed, and that's how you can or not. So I'd like to see the missed calls, because I know of people that have given up because the call's taken so long to answer that they've gone away. And if I know personally of people that have done that, I bet every single one of us in this gather that information so we can make correct decisions. My second question is around the satisfaction surveys. We're getting 95%, 96% results. And the satisfaction surveys are getting very satisfied and satisfied. However, we haven't reported those that aren't satisfied. And I know that aren't satisfied and how many people are really unsatisfied. It doesn't give you the area to work on to improve. So I'm not criticising, I'm just saying that there are things we could make a much better system. We have a problem with our phone system. We all know we have a problem. It takes too long to answer, and then not everybody, once it's been initially answered by a voice or not a routing system from the beginning, but a voice, then there's an issue in getting the calls to the next stage. We know that's an issue. We know it's going to be worked on. We know we're getting a new system that should get rid of all those errors. But it would be much better if we got the negatives as well as the positives. So if I could have answers.
Mrs. Hack.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed the increased call volume as well, and for the increased calls be that the customer service centre was actually closed for people walking in, having appointments. Is that a reason for increased call volume? And also, I would like to mention here that I read in the members' bulletin that our website came in top 30 nationally. So I would like to congratulate all of those being involved in that.
Well, Mr. Gill will make a note of all those things. Yes. Okay. Just a quick note on 6.4, refuse and recycling. There's a big report being done by county at the minute by external consultants. I know Ben Wixton's coming out quite well, refuse recycling, with all the figures. Well, if we're not the lowest, we're the second lowest cost per collection in the county. So that's good news for us. And we're also the lowest in carbon emissions as well. So that's another good thing. Right. Law and democracy, corporate assets, Gail again.
Yeah, I'm obviously conscious of the time, so I don't intend to go through the report line by line. You'll note that in terms of public assets, the section is very busy. A lot of work has been undertaken on the draft parking strategy. As a consequence, other strategies have been had to be put to one side. What we have done in terms of capacity and also in terms of succession planning, we have appointed an assistant corporate assets manager, an experienced officer that can hit the ground running, and he will support Mrs. Kind in drawing together those matters. On page 31, it sets out positions with regard to the community centres and toilet blocks. Then we're also looking at a lease with OBL's Football Club in respect to the Park Pavilion. And then the routine maintenance is ongoing. As expected, the cemeteries and allotments are continually busy, and we've started the capital works to replace the boiler at Uplands Park, and enhanced sewage pump station, Blake Road, etc. So that effectively covers corporate assets. If any members have any questions on corporate assets at this point.
Any questions? No? Move on then, Mr. Gill.
Thank you. Next is environmental health and licensing teams. I think most members will be aware now that we had a split in the function of teams. We now have a dedicated private sector housing team, which deals with selective licensing and all matters related to the condition and standards of privately rented properties, and also privately occupied properties, because we don't just deal with those that are rented. We've had a number of cases recently of other issues where the staff have got involved to bring the properties up to standard for people that own and live in them. The work housing is still giving advice in terms of COVID. COVID, as you appreciate, all the restrictions only ended on the 19th of July. There's a lot of places they're still continuing, so we're still providing support for people. There has been a food service delivery plan which has been submitted to the regulatory committee, which has been approved for the year. There are considerable difficulties in terms of the backlog of work that is outstanding on food safety because of the COVID. There is a lot of premises that have started. I think we're in the region of 200 or 300 businesses that have started during the pandemic. We have bid for and been successful in receiving just short of £2,000 from the Food Standards Agency, which is to enable us to provide the admin support so that we can triage all of these new businesses and at least get a handle on what's happening. We are currently out for recruitment for an environmental health officer. Unfortunately, we are struggling. The market is very difficult. It's likely that if we do recruit somebody, we're going to have to pay for market supplements, or we have to pay overtime to our own staff, but then our own staff, the hours that they're working become an issue. So we are trying to manage it to make sure that we comply with all of our statutory requirements, because we don't want to be criticised by the FSA. And then going forward, the private sector housing team are still working on the selective licensing scheme at South Houston, and the details of where we are set out on page 32. And members of licensing and regulated also have received an update that came around via an email. Any questions on the environmental health?
Mr. Lloydall.
Electoral Democratic Services.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's the next one. So if there's no questions, if you're happy for me to proceed, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. So, Electoral and Democratic Services, you'll all be aware that earlier in the year we lost the Democratic Services officer who left us for the position. And at that point, we were joined by Ms. Byrne. We have now successfully recruited a new officer, and that officer is joining us at the beginning of October. So that will increase the capacity in the team. We're currently in the process of running through the annual canvas It's somewhat easier this year, and that we're allowed to use little emails. There has been some concern from the public that actually there were spam emails. We see a lot of work for us in trying to persuade them that they were genuine. That process will continue by the end of this month into next month. We'll be having canvassers out on the doors, knocking the doors to try and get the rest of the information with a view to publishing the register on the 1st of December. You'll also be aware that the live meeting or the streaming of meetings was revoked by the government. We're continuing to press with technology, and you'll all be aware tonight because we have the new camera and the new microphones. And we are seeking to continue to use those. Beware, Councillor Boyce is with us. Councillor Boyce is here to put his input in. But because he's not here in the room, he's not allowed to vote. There is a push from the Lawyers in Local Government Association, which represents one of the doctors, for the rules to be amended. It's permitted in Wales to hold remote meetings and hybrid meetings, and there's no clear reason as to why it can't be done in England. So we are pressing to bring them back in. So that's on elections and democratic services. If anybody's got
any questions, Mr. Lloyd?
Yes, thank you. Just to clarify, on about halfway down 7.3, we talk about a light touch canvas communications, which they only need to respond if any changes need to be applied. So just say no changes and send it back. Do you intend to do any testing of that, of any? Those who have sent it all back says no changes. Is there any they want to test? Just make sure that they haven't got an house full of test changes.
The canvas is done in accordance with the Electoral Commission rules, and the Electoral Commission rules don't require that. The concern would generally be that something comes back and there is a change, and as a result of that change, somebody is disenfranchised. So if I put the form in for my property and said my wife wasn't there anymore and she still was, then she would lose the right to vote. And that's the issue in this sort of canvas. Where we don't get a response, then we will go and visit. But in a lot of cases, people stay in the same properties for many, many years. There is no change. And it's just not cost effective or required to go and check that it's Mr. Lloyd all in there himself, because it doesn't, we will cross check and reference things. So we'll use the council tax data for the single person discount, and there's a data matching exercise so that we know that we know where we suspect the people are that are on the road. But as I say, we do it in accordance with the Electoral Commission rules, and we don't do any testing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do appreciate the bureaucracy that goes around this. So we're staying within the guidelines of what we've got. That's it. We live in a different world now. We do live in a different world. And things happen within our community, which recently happened, which I have to thank Mr. Gill for supporting what we did locally. I won't go into any details because it just safeguarding. And that's for why I've asked the question. Unfortunately, we do have people out there. What I'm saying is that if we're not going to do any light touches, we're not going to do anything to follow up with that, then okay, when it's on record that just to be on the safe side, if we're staying within the rules and we don't do that, that's fine. But it's on.
Yep. Right. Okay. Community and Wellbeing update.
Yep. Community and Wellbeing. I'm sure that if I get it wrong, Mr. King is going to put me right. Health and Wellbeing Board. Its last meeting was on the 6th of July, and there were a number of presentations on updates on services affecting the borough. Members will be aware that we have the Community Health Improvement Officer, working funded by government in respect of trying to reach those hard to reach groups in the community that are suffering from illnesses such as diabetes, and also dealing with the COVID vaccination and COVID myths, so to speak. We're now in a position where we've had a second member of staff who's recently started, so together with a team, you may well have seen them out in OB handing out the lateral flow test. Between them, they helped with CCG in setting up the COVID vaccination, the pop-up vaccination in South Wigston, which was highly successful. And they're working with various other groups and encouraging and seeking volunteers. Chair, unfortunately, may I just say, the chair did say to me earlier this evening, I hope my phone doesn't go off because I can't switch it off. Which is true because it's whilst the chair deals with that, we'll continue. But we also have reached an agreement with the school's sports coordinator, who is going to be effectively attached to our staff and community and wellbeing team, but paid for externally in order for the programme to run. The person needed to have an employer, and we have agreed to be that employer, but the wages are being paid elsewhere. And as a result of that, we'll be looking to improve the sport and physical activities programmes over the next few months. And we're looking at further work with the community champions, looking for volunteers that can help in terms of health COVID-19 vaccination messages. We want to train them to be a community champion. So they come to us as a volunteer, and we give them the skills so they can go out and do that work without that much support from the team. Community safety, set out at 7.4.5 for a position. The chair will know what's happening. And going forward, there's going to be a meeting so that we can sort out the delivery plan. And again, we've got youth, young people and youth provision and leisure contract. I don't propose to go into those in any detail unless members have any comments or questions, because you've obviously had the report. So just dealing with the health and wellbeing, except for the ASB. Has any member got any questions on that section?
Question at all? Mr. Lloyd?
742, the staffing update.
Yeah.
That paragraph alone is actually talking about 6 other members of staff. Interpreting it, but it's a question of saying, well, where's the money coming from? Is it affecting our budget, or are they pension? Somewhere else? To become an employer, then give you some significant risks about do you pay their superannuation, do you pay the insurance, do you pay those employment costs. So it's not some clarification about the impact of that on our budget, and have we got the funds to do it? Who's managing it? Where the money's coming from for that? There's a lot of significant questions there that's not here, that I'm sure that once you give me to it, it becomes quite clear.
As a lawyer, just very briefly, the first paragraph is 7.4.2, the second community health improvement officer is paid for out of a grant that we were successful in obtaining. In terms of the graduate community physical activity, we've always had a graduate in that section, various graduates over the past years. Sometimes it's done as part of their degree, so that as a work experience, other times it's afterwards. In terms of the school enabler, then the whole of that post is funded externally, including the tax, national insurance and everything else. If I could just assure you that if we ever come to you and say that we have employed somebody and we don't have a budget, then we've made it clear to you that we don't have a budget for that post. And quite often we'll be requesting the budget to be approved. So all of these posts that we've got in this section are all covered. There will be no further impact on the budget because they're already in the budget book, because we need to have the money there before we go out to recruitment. Because if we go out to recruitment and say, do you want to come and join us? We've got this good job, but hey, I'm not sure whether I've got any money to pay you. I think the answer is going to be no, thank you. I'll go somewhere else.
Right. Okay. Well then, a growth bit, or is it something that we're budgeted for? And the way I look at it, you see, told we've got no money. We've been told that if we don't do this and do that, we're going to 141 officer against us and we get bailiffs in. But then I look at all of this, coming back to say, well, it's in the budget. So I understand, that's fine. But the question is that these posts, they say, okay, it's already in the budget. Well, I think we need some clarification well before this happens to let the members decide whether we're going to go ahead with it. Because it's got an impact on the budget and we're having to do what we're doing, which we don't like to do or don't want to do. And we might say, no, we don't want to do it because we want that money to do something else with and to maintain one of our policies. And I thought that if this is how it's going to work, then we need to have some serious conversations about who runs this council and who controls that budget. If this is something that we need to look at.
If I can just come back and make a point, Councillor Lloyd, the structure, the number and the level of staff at this council is a matter for the Chief Executive under the Housing and Local Government Act of 1989. When the budgets are approved, the budget that goes before members in March or whatever, that will have in there the staffing figures. Now, all of these posts are covered in the budget. They are not new posts. A lot of them are funded externally through the LRS. We have people that are working that are funded through grants that have come from central government. And even if you were to, for instance, take the view that you didn't want to have the new community health improvement officer, you couldn't spend that money anywhere else because that money is ring fenced and it's ring fenced by government, and we have to account back to government on a regular basis as to how we have spent it, not just in terms of wages, but also in terms of IT and everything else. It does look like a lot of new posts, but these posts that we have are on a cycle. The graduates tend to be here for 12 months, possibly 18 months. And at the end of that period, we then have to rebid. And it's generally done through the LRS. They hold the interviews, they do the adverts, and we're fortunate enough to get somebody. If we don't, the issue is if we don't take these people that are offered to us and that are funded, then the bottom line is we won't be offered them again in future because they will go to other authorities who might want to take 2 of them or 3 of them. So we need to make sure that we have this constant circle of staff. A lot of them who are young, it's the first step on their career, and frequently they're not with us that long before they move on and get a job elsewhere.
Right. Well, mate, thank you, Mr. Yellow. Appreciate all of that. But I have reserved the right to be able to say, then the budget is set by the members of this board, this council. Therefore, a detailed explanation is more than welcome so that we don't sit here having this discussion. The grants are there, and they're grants from various people, various other bodies, and it's not impacting on the total budget that we're having to pass. I've no problems with that because we've identified where that money's coming from. Here, it doesn't say anything. Finance, there are no implications directly arising from this report. Well, there is, because it's 6 people there. It's coming from grants and everything else, let's put it in. some very, very decisions against what we want to do. And if to support what the chief executive is doing, we need to support what the council is doing. We can't do that if we don't get or not in receipt of the full information, which isn't here at the moment. I'd appreciate it that if we've got it here, we can then help support, build on that and build on the successes of these graduates and so on. Okay. Thank you for listening.
Right, okay, Mr Gill, are you carrying on now or?
Yes, very briefly, Chair, the final section there is antisocial behaviour. So we've got a total of 31 ASB reports. It's similar to the previous years. And the most important thing to note is in respect of the successful prosecution of the community protection notice in South Wixon, which did by the press headline. It is, we believe, the first successful prosecution for that offence in Leicestershire, and it shows that as an authority, we can and we will, where possible, be an exemplar and show other people how we can do it and how we can do it. And I'm aware that on my forum on the Lawyers in Local Government website that I was mentioned earlier, a question was asked about a similar issue, and I was able to go back and say, well, actually, this is what you do. And a lot of people were interested in this. So that's the Law and Democracy report.
Any questions thereon? I'd also
say congratulations on the council has recently been successful in prosecuting the breach of corruption. Otherwise, on the next paragraph, I think that congratulations to that regard too. Thank you for that.
Okay, other questions? We will report? Yes? Okay, then. Thank you very much. Now, that's the end of this evening's meeting. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Chris, we need you.
I'll send you an invite tomorrow then.